This is a short video on the femininity of productivity. I have had a way of noticing the culture I was in and detaching myself emotionally and tactically from it, and then seeing its blind spots and delusions, and then using that perspective to control and improve the culture, or to direct it to get things done that it can't get done on its own contents because of its blind spots and biases. And I've been doing this all of my life for a long, long time, from age 5 years old. And I don't know where it came from in my life. I'm good at it. I'm very good at it. I've never met anybody better than me at it. I have met some people I think are as good as me at it. And uh, so I was at EDS Corporation, and we had 2,000 salesmen, and none of them were selling anything for almost 2 years to General Motors, our biggest customer. They were all assigned a GM account, and none of them were selling anything. And I made the first sale to GM account, and I wasn't a salesman. I wasn't a manager. I was just a nobody employee. And it surprised me as much as it surprised Ross Perot, as much as it surprised Roger Smith, the chairman of General Motors. Everybody was surprised. Roger Smith wanted to know who I was and how I had done this sale, and he called EDS management saying, "Who is Richard Green?" And nobody knew my name because I wasn't the manager, and they called down the hierarchy, and nobody knew my name because I wasn't the manager. They finally got down to my manager, and he said, "Oh, I know, he works for me." And I ended up eating lunch with Ross Perot the next day, and then a couple of days after that, eating lunch with Roger Smith. So, how in the hell did I sell when nobody else, when 2,000 professionals were not selling? Well, I intuited that EDS culture and sales culture, both independently, were too male. And American culture was too male. Sales culture was too male. And EDS's culture was too militaristically male. And so all three of them tried to sell by impressing you with powerful ejections of their accomplishments and how wonderful, self-praisings. And General Motors was not permeable to that message at all. They felt they were much greater than EDS was, and until their greatness was recognized thoroughly and in detail by EDS, they weren't going to listen to crap from a bunch of ignorant Texans. They had more people in EDS with PhDs than all of the employees worldwide that EDS had, and they knew that. And then EDS is doing PowerPoints, and I asked a GM manager at the back of the room who was obviously not impressed, "What's wrong with this presentation, sir?" He said, "Add 4 zeros to the slides and we would be impressed, but you guys look like what we spend on toilet paper, and you guys are just nothing in terms of scale. And you're so arrogant and stupid you don't even realize that you just look like a joke to us when you put your slides up." And it was true, I had to admit. And anyway, so a long story, and I've told the story elsewhere, so I'm not going to tell it here, but it's in my books. Super Selling is a great place to read it. But basically, we decided to create a feminine sales process. And part of that was a feminine style event in which my company, instead of loading it up with speakers telling everybody how great we were, I would be the only speaker from EDS. The audience would be GM people, and I would select middle people in GM to present to top people at GM to change what the project mix was at GM, and then show demonstrations from outsiders, not EDS, in the afternoon that matched those insider projects, and then say that EDS would help get all this developed. If you want us to help, we'll help all this become real. And so it was a listening and a presenting the customer to himself and presenting outsider accomplishments to the customer rather than presenting us to the customer. It was a feminine designed event, and it worked wonderfully. We did it with 3 successive GM divisions, starting with the small division so we wouldn't make errors there first. And I mean, we wouldn't make big errors with the bigger divisions. And then we got to truck and bus third, which was the biggest GM division, I think $22 billion of annual sales. And they loved it enough, and they told us to come to a GERM meeting. And then they, at the end of the GERM meeting, after we'd sat for 2 hours in the darkness of the EDS people here, we raised our hand and said, "You guys have $17 million. Tell me in a week how you're going to spend it." And that was the first sales to GM other than by Ross Perot. And then Ross was so impressed, he flew in his private plane us to Langley, Virginia to work with intelligence agencies. So the femininity of productivity and the femininity of creativity and the femininity of sales are real, extraordinarily powerful. I've written an entire book on it called Super Selling. And you read the 33 cases in that book, every single one of them comes from feminizing systems. Now, what happened was I discovered this in idea forms while doing master's degree at the University of Michigan. And this is the mid 80s and early 90s, and re-engineering was the big buzzword in what all of industry was doing. And re-engineering was basically taking total quality theory from Japan about a horizontal view of the business instead of a monkey rank, stupid American competition view of the business, and using that horizontal view to guide internet application to global processes, which were horizontal in the Japanese view. And so the Japanese quality gave the theory of business that allowed the web to be very powerfully applied to business. And this was called re-engineering, although I'm the only one in the world who strategically explains it this well. But re-engineering was going on everywhere. And I was asked by the American Society of Equality to write, after my very successful award-winning book, Global Quality, to write a book on re-engineering, and I was preparing that book. And you can read, it's a chapter now in a book called Managing Complexity that you can buy on scribe.com by me. Now, I studied re-engineering projects, and the thing was when we looked at how the process was described before the re-engineering project, and then how the process was described after the re-engineering project, one of my employees said, it's feminine. And she was right. I mean, it was just incredible. And so we started looking at all of them and what described, and we had notes, so we had to go back to our notes of what people said things were like before, and then we had a results document, what people described the process was like afterwards. We had in some cases people who actually used the new process. They described what it was like to actually do it. And in every case, the adjectives became feminine. So re-engineering made work processes better by feminizing them. And then the reason for this was absolutely breathtakingly obvious. I mean, how could it have been otherwise? And then we went around and we looked at what else maybe making processes creative feminizes them. We went to advertising companies and looked at great ads, like Panasonic's ads dominated the world for years in their category, and they were not done by professional ad companies, all done by ordinary employees and engineers in the company. And how did they do it? And they were dramatically, in 5 or 8 modalities, more feminine than professional advertising company ads. And this lack of assertiveness and this use of gentleness and this emotional mood insinuation were so powerful, and the consumer was unprepared to defend against it and didn't want to defend it. They wanted to be enraptured that way. And so, wow, this was a real doorway to power and success. If you want to know what a video on sex, wealth, and power and fame would say, that's all it would say: the femininity of productivity, creativity, wealth, success, power, and fame. Because that's the doorway, that's the open doorway.